publisher, she was a publisher at Random House when I think all three of you were published as well, and Penguin and Rabbit Rat came out as well. Going back to people being interested, has having written a contemporary Pakistani novel helped your career?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question that people are interested in Pakistan. This is where the other kind of boom is happening. Sorry, quite. Absolutely, people are interested in Pakistan. I'm going to repeat my joke. This is where the other kind of boom is happening, and people are interested in booms.
Okay, Musharraf, yours was not a contemporary Pakistani novel. Between Clay and Dust, it would be very difficult to even identify it as being a Pakistani novel. There's nothing you could specifically pin down. So how do you feel about the attention that Pakistani writers get? You'll have to scoot up.
I'm going to sit this in my lap so that nobody can take it away from me and speak my mind. Okay, so, well, there are two things. When people talk about Pakistani literature and its impact on the world, how it's seen, I always wonder why the publishers in the West are not at all interested in getting contemporary Pakistani fiction being written in Urdu, translated and published there. Because it is being translated, there are competent translators who do that job. But, and I know this because, I know the history of submissions about contemporary, Urdu writing that were submitted and were not accepted. So, which didn't find a publisher. So, we have to revisit this whole idea of what exactly are they looking for when they talk about Pakistani literature in the West. And because we are unfortunately a very impressionable people, we do borrow a lot of that impressions which the West creates of this fiction coming out of Pakistan. Some of it is definitely good, but we have to stand back and see what is being written about Pakistan in English language and compare it to what's being written about Pakistan and our society and the stories in our society in Urdu, and how do they relate with each other? Is there a disconnect? And I find that a lot of this talk of, this edginess in Pakistani fiction, there's this, this cutting edge. Well, those who speak Urdu and those who write in Urdu are also living in this bloody society. And they are also writing about, the very same concerns. But they somehow manage to write about it in a more grounded. They're not performing for the West. They are writing for an audience in Urdu, and it has to be relevant for that audience. And we have, people writing today in Urdu, great short stories. Mr. Ali Akbar, who is with us here, Mr. Khalid Dur will be joining us tomorrow. And this, if I know that because the kind of stuff that gets translated and sent out there for submission, it does not get, because it does not fit into this narrative about Pakistan.
Hold on, publishers aren't philanthropists; they're business people.
Absolutely, I agree.
And if this stuff were capable of selling in large numbers, presumably they would be publishing it. If the translations, as you say, are commodities that are saleable, then they would be selling them. These guys are pretty hard-edged.
I know.
The publishers, I mean.
Yes, but you see, the problem is that they want to sell what they think will sell in the market in the name of Pakistan. This is what happens.
Do you not think choosing to write, because all three of you choose to write in English,
yes.
Do you not think choosing to write in English means that you do also, you've made the first step towards pandering to a Western market, because you've identified that is where you want to get market? Well, yes, absolutely, go on, please. Because language is something that keeps being brought up as audience.
Since writers borrow from each other, borrow Musharraf's thing of putting the microphone in my lap. I have to take exception here to one thing. When I started writing The Diary of a Social Butterfly, I started writing in the early 90s, and I wrote for a Pakistani audience. It was in a newspaper. It was a column which appeared for basically what was then, because Friday Times at that time was a very small local paper, and it appeared for a Lahori audience more or less, and then it became for a Pakistani audience, and then it got taken up by people in India, and it became an Indian thing, and then it became, so it's had that kind of journey, but first of all it found its validation in Pakistan. And I think it's not so much about which language you choose to write in. The fact is that I went to a school where I was instructed in the medium of English. And so it's a language in which I feel more comfortable writing, not necessarily speaking, but writing. So I wrote it in that language. And I think at the end of the day, all three of us have written stories which we feel engaged in, which we are interested in. I was talking to you about your story, The Widow, Story of the Widow. It has no politics in it. It is situated in Karachi, but it is about the life of a woman and a man together. Your stories are about people living in a river, in a village by the banks of a river in Punjab, and they're about their daily struggles. It's about how they negotiate their way in the world. I think basically it's my stories are about this crazy woman who wants to buy a pair of Prada shoes. So it's about what interests you and engages you, and if it finds an audience, great. But I think we all start from the premise of what interests us.
Absolutely. I agree with that, and I'm not talking, I don't think either yours or Daniyal's stories can be referred to as being edgy in that derivative sense of word, which people.
I'm sorry about that.
But I'll just say that I make no qualms about why I write in English. I write in English because there is no publishing industry in Urdu. Otherwise, my Urdu is better than my English. I would write in Urdu, and if I knew that there was a distribution network, there was an industry, and I would not be cheated, and I would not be dependent on idiots for reviewing my work here. I would write in Urdu. But this is our society. When I'll just give you an example of what our rights are. I've lived outside Pakistan for a number of years, and I've met other communities. Let's talk about Muslims. Whenever they move as a community or as a family outside the country, one of the first things that they set up is a language school for their kids. And when we move out of Pakistan, the very first thing that we set up is a chicken tikka shop. So that's where our pride lies, and it's a good thing. I like chicken tikka. But this shows us engagement with culture, with literature, with these things in our society. So I will continue writing in English, and I will continue writing about the subjects that appeal to me. But I want to just like I say that Urdu, we talk about Manto and we forget other writers. There is a narrative in Urdu which is contemporaneous, which talks about our everyday reality, but that does not find a publisher or an audience in the West because it does not fit into that category of Pakistan which is exploding and mullahs are running behind it.
I agree with no, but okay. Maybe if we look at this in terms of the reactions that people have had to your work. I think that journey of being sort of picked up and being published. What are the first reactions that you had with respect to what you were writing about? Not your style, but what you're writing about.
It's not about Pakistan. That's not what they say. Oh, great, it's about Pakistan.
So there's no turning to you for greater knowledge as to what's happening in that part of the world. And do you feel that allows you to get more?
Obviously, it gets you an extra audience.
Okay.
And I think if somebody was to use my books as an almanac, I think they'd get a very strange view of what is happening.
You do something very interesting. You take what is essentially a fact about Pakistan. It could be something sort of culled from a newspaper. It could be just a statistic. And you then have this woman who proceeds to live her life completely unaffected by it. This is a very important point that you're making. How does your audience react to that? Well, what do they say? To this very obvious disconnect that she shows.
It's I'll go back to something you said earlier about reactions that people have to your writing. Butterfly has had many reactions over the years. When I was thinking of writing tender hooks in England, I spoke to my agent about it, and I said to him, particularly in the kind of language that I want to write it in, and about this woman's life, because she's such a Pakistani character. And he said to me, no, she's not a Pakistani character, she's a universal character, because women like this will be very privileged, very cloistered, very sort of cocooned, wealthy lives, live in Riyadh, live in Rio de Janeiro, live in Jakarta, live in Moscow. So she's a universal person. And he writes about her with fidelity, about how she really lives in Pakistan. She will have resonance outside. I think the kind of reactions that I've had to Butterfly range from a whole lot of different things. I mean, some people in India, for example, say, God, you people are so resilient, you know, getting up every morning, not living go to bazaar, and come back. And there are other people who say to me, it's a really blistering social satire. And then there are other people who say to me, hi, mujhe pata hai tumne kis pe adopt kiya. Anyway, so it has a range of reactions, but what I want to say here is that, Naipaul once said, books are orphans. They make their own way in the world. Once a book leaves your hands, as a writer, it leaves your hands, it goes out into the world, and people will engage with it and interpret it as they see fit by their own lives. Yeah. You cannot send a manual with the book saying, this is how I want to be read. Some people say to me, आप चिकनी क्यों लिखती हैं? आप serious किताब कब लिखेंगी? And I personally think I'm a serious writer. I think I'm writing satire, I'm writing social commentary, but then people will interpret my work by their own lives, and that is their prerogative.
Now, Daniyal, what has been one of the observations I've heard when people read in other rooms, other wonders, is that class tends to play a very strong role in this. It's a narrative that seems to go permeate the entire book. Was this something that's almost inescapable when you when you look at the stories that you do based in Pakistan?
Yeah, I think I was earlier going to say that look, place is the setting of the story is just scenery, and that the stories are universal. That one aims to be universal, or one is universal, because all stories are human stories. But one thing that is different about Pakistan than the West is the level to which it's a hierarchical, class-based society. So yeah, that's one thing that really is true about Pakistan. It's incredibly layered. And you can't write about this place without writing about that in really different ways.
Do you think that lends itself to literature, class, and the
absolutely, it's so interesting. There's so much more connection. In the West, you live, you don't know your next door neighbor. In Pakistan, everybody knows hundreds of people because everybody's so, there's this whole verticality of relationship.
Yes.
So it definitely does lend itself to literature. We live very complex, very interconnected lives in Pakistan.
Yeah. Musharraf, between clay and dust, skirted around a lot of, completely avoided a lot of issues that we all experience on a daily basis. But that, I think, is because you didn't talk about contemporary Pakistan. Do you think you were taking a gamble by choosing a subject that wasn't about contemporary Pakistan?
When the story for Widow was published, one of my editors in Canada suggested that why don't I make the title a story of a Karachi widow, because then they said that would really make it. But I said no, this is the story, but let it go at that. That was based in Karachi, so it was a very localized thing. For Between Clay and Dust, I did not aim it to be a Pakistani novel. And it does not mention Pakistan at all. And my friends in India have told me, the place that you described, because I've left that place unnamed. They said it could be Azamgarh, it could be Delhi, it could be Aligarh, some alleys of those places. And people in Pakistan have, made a connection with old city, Lahore, and all these places. So, and that was the aim, to not localize it, because I was talking about a shared culture. It was not about Pakistani culture, how it has unfolded or unraveled, after the partition. Nor was I talking about Indian culture as it stands today. So that was a gamble, and yes, I knew that, but it was also something that you aim for, and whether or not you're successful in conveying that, because I had not even visited the Panelist Akhada, about which I was writing. When we launched the book in Lahore for the first time, I visited the Panelist Akhada in the old city, and it was all a research and making an imagined world. And Akhada itself is a very simple structure. Just sand, clay pit. So there is really nothing to imagine. But how the Panelists live, and that very regimented life that they live. So it was all imagined, from research. So I think you have to take that gamble, and if you're able to pull it through, you pat yourself on the back that I managed, but I could have failed equally. So I don't say that yes, I went in knowing that I made it. You don't know that.
Yeah.
What's really interesting, one of the really interesting things about writing is that you're trying to be very, very specific in terms of being concrete and being accurate in some sense, and at the same time you're trying to make that very specific thing universal. And there's this sort of weird pull, in which is what makes fiction so interesting. One of the many things that makes fiction interesting.
So when you're trying to give as accurate a depiction of what your characters are doing and the setting that they live in, and the fact that you have written Pakistani, very Pakistani, at some point you might have written some very Pakistani novels. Did you feel that there are certain things you could not write about? Did you find yourself self-censoring? Moni, there's certain things, the reality of living in Pakistan, they might make you a bit trepidatious about bringing up certain subjects.
You're asking about whether you can write about your family.
That's reserved for you. But even that.
You know what they say, Danny, when a writer is born in a family, feel sorry for their family.
On many levels.
On many levels. As I said, I started writing this column for Friday Times in the beginning, and I was my editor said only one thing to me when I started writing. He said, be careful. Don't write about you don't know anything about. Just be careful of that. And you may find that you're wading into waters that you don't intend of. And that is what I kept in mind. And as Musharraf says, of course you can research, and of course you can imagine, and that's a very important part of the writer's craft. But I have, essentially for these two novels, I think for these first three novels, I wrote two novels in it. I wrote what I knew about, and for that there was nothing that I felt that I had to stand back from or not say, and I pretty much accessed all areas that I wanted to do.
Okay, let me be specific. Do you self-censor?
Do I not write about my
You write about Bruna.
Yes. Do you write about things that could be risky?
I think one thing I don't write about sex because I find it very, very difficult. I think it is extremely difficult to write about sex. If you can write like you should. Mullahs, personally, I feel I don't know enough about them to write convincingly about them. I do refer to them obviously in my work, but I don't write from the viewpoint of a mullah. I cannot write about what goes on in the life of a mullah or in the home of a mullah because I don't know enough about it.
Okay. But that's not quite enough. I mean, obviously we all sort of imagine ourselves into the lives of people whom we don't know. And yet there are certain lives that we would just prefer not to imagine ourselves into simply because there might be repercussions. Right?
I haven't yet gone there. But when I do, maybe I will. I don't know.
But would you, mean, Aysha is talking about the fact that there is a censorship that we have to impose upon ourselves because we live in Pakistan.
Well,
I think you can't deny it, but maybe you do. I do.
No, there is. If you don't spend as much time there, maybe that might affect your freedom to write something. I mean, if you have a farm in rural Punjab, you might find yourself perhaps a little bit more exposed. So that might determine a degree more of self-censorship, perhaps. Musharraf, do you feel there's anything that you would think twice about writing about? You're amongst friends.
I know. My very first novel, just published in 2000, Sarkar Special.
Yeah.
I had no clue, what I was writing, and I wanted to, write a novel, but you have no idea where the hell it's going. You just know you want to write about these things. We had termites in a house. I wanted to write about termites. My Nana was a very colorful character, so I wanted to put him there. And I had this, silly idea about what eternity is like. So I wanted to, put that philosophy in there too. And, my father was writing a book, so that struggle and that effort and the termites eating up all his notes and his books, that I wanted to put there. You can't find your way, so you just start writing character sketches of the people I knew, my father, the typist who came to type all his notes, and my Nana and all that. And I was worried that, writing about my father. She will immediately know it's her. Come on. So, but when that novel was published, another Khala read it, and she was a good Khala, and she was so happy with the portrayal of that bad Khala, she thought it was her, and she was happy with the fact that she was actually in a book. So people have, you can write. You can criticize people in your stories, and they love it because they are in a story. So there's this relationship.
But actually, but I think to follow on from your question, Aysha, so let's just for the conversation say we accept that there is censorship. The next question is, does it matter that we self-censor? Does it matter to us as writers?
Because you want to write freely, and unfortunately that is not possible for anyone. Forget about Pakistanis. You can't be an American writer writing about certain things and live to tell the tale, or have the book published and not feel repercussions.
I was talking to a publisher in London a couple of months ago, and he said to me that there have been at least 4 books that they have received, submissions that they have received, and they thought the books were very, very, very good, and they have not been able to publish it.
For what reason? Because of
were these Pakistani?
The fundamentalist repercussion. Yeah, right.
No, not by Pakistan.
So, but that's, in terms of our individual craft, I don't somehow. I acknowledge this censorship that I. Or that's imposed on me, but I'm not sure it matters to me. Which I know is not a very correct view, but I don't think I get that.
Yeah, but there's an interesting thing. When you say that there are certain things you won't write, and anecdotal evidence. When Hanif wrote Exploding Mangoes, it's one of the few sex scenes that has been done by a Pakistani author, and I would say successfully. Sexual sex scene. And one of the things that struck him was that having gone through publicity tours in Pakistan, and that was after having done all publicity in England, that nobody in Pakistan had asked him about the sex scene. Everybody in England, or wherever else he'd done tours, had asked him. Every interview, every journalist, audience member, it was almost tantamount, we didn't know there was that sort of thing happening in the army. But nobody in Pakistan asked that question. This is just another example of how different our audiences are as well. So, do you find that there's this weird sort of, there are things that resonate with the West and there's things that resonate with Pakistanis with your work?
Yeah.
I think, well, yes.
Let's move on. Moni, you had mentioned it was very interesting how you got picked up and how you got published. And I believe
Picked up.
How were you published your first book? How was it published?
My first book, I wrote my first book. I had a very time of it. It's very difficult in the West to get published because they receive a lot of unsolicited manuscripts. Mine was an unsolicited manuscript. I think most debut novels are. I wrote my novel. I sent it to an agent. I gave it to a friend of mine to read first. And he said he knew a little bit about the literary world. He said, send it to a particular agent. I sent it to him. He called me back and said, I really like the book. I would like to meet with you. We met. This was in England. He said, I will send your book out. It got picked up by Penguin. And then it got picked up by Penguin India. And then it was published here.
And that was End of Innocence. So then when you showed him Tenterhooks, was he like, oh, how is that possible? Because Innocence is a completely different style. It's a novel, somebody written novel.
Yeah.
And then,
No, my publisher had seen Diary of a Social Butterfly. My agent had seen Diary of a Social Butterfly because Diary of a Social Butterfly came about in a completely different sort of way. I had gone to a Jaipur Literary Festival and I was speaking about End of Innocence and I was approached afterwards by an Indian publisher who said, I need your column. And it was picked up and republished by an Indian newspaper as well. And she said, I would like you to compile it. And I said, but it's already out, people have read it, what's the point? She said, no, it's become separate things. They are different, they have a life of their own. So I said, alright, and I was stuck in a book that I was writing at the time, which actually never happened. But I thought I'd take off a month and I'll edit a few columns and I'll write an introduction and a conclusion and I'll send it off. So I sent it off and I thought that I spoke to my agent and I said, I think it will only find a market in India. So he said, yeah, just send it to him. So we sent it to 4 publishers. And of whom Chiki Sarkar was one at Random House and she wrote back. And it's interesting what she said to me. She wrote back and she said, I really like this. I would love to publish it. But I'm very surprised that this work has come out of Pakistan. And she said, because I thought this sort of satirical voice would come out of India. This would be the kind of thing that Indians would write about. And I'm very surprised that it has come out of Pakistan. I don't know why she was surprised, but so it came to be and it found an audience in India. And then I thought, let's just rewrite a novel based on these characters. So I did that.
Daniyal, I wanted to ask you, your first book is a very Pakistani book. And has that influenced your decision on your next book about what you've chosen to write about? Perhaps if you could tell us a little bit about what it's going to be about?
Yeah, I said this in my previous, I just had another session. But I mean, you don't really choose what you're going to write about. It sort of chooses you. And I think that's really true because you're spending so much time that unless it's like falling in love, you don't choose the person you fall in love with. You fall in love with the person that you are, that thing happens between you. And it's the same thing with the story, that you're sort of bumbling through life, and there's some image or some group of images or some characters that you're obsessed with and that stick to you. And that, I think that's part of what it is to be a writer, that you have these things that stick to you. So my next book is actually, it has nothing to do with Pakistan. And in fact, I'm determined not to put the word Pakistan in it.
Is that because of responses to your first novel? You feel you want
not at all. It's another world that I belong to and that I know and that I love. And there are whole other sets of characters who are entirely unlike characters, or in some at least superficial ways, unlike the characters that I've written about before. And I just want to explore that in the world, you know. And I find myself drawn to it and attracted to it. And so my next book is actually set in America.
Okay. And when do we think when you could see your novel?
I'm going to turn it in the fall. So.
Okay, so 2014?
Exactly.
Okay. I want to ask, the question to Musharraf. I was a journalist at some point, a set of questions. And obviously the Lit Fests are going on, and there's, questions about how literature in Pakistan is evolving. And they asked a rather odd question. They asked, do you think now that the withdrawal from Afghanistan has happened, there's going to be a drop in interest in Pakistani literature? And I was a bit, Daniyal.
I'm optimist, you're suggesting that the withdrawal from Afghanistan is going to lead to general stability. I doubt that.
So you anticipate a rocky future, and that turmoil will produce perhaps more interest?
There's a lot to be said about what Daniyal just said. There's going to be a constant market for edgy Pakistani fiction from this part of the world for the years to come. But I think essentially as a writer, because we ask this question, and because we work in this industry, and we are concerned with how it's being written, how it's being seen, and all that. There's a point where, as a writer, you have to be more introspective and say, why the hell am I writing? And what do I want to write about? So, ठीक है, अगर आपको इस तरह का मौजू कोई पसंद आ रहा है, if you want to write about current affairs, this is situation fiction. That, this is the situation in Iraq or whatever. I'm writing mortar shells exploding. Fine, you write that, and there's absolute justification for a writer to be exploring that theme and writing that. But I can just speak for myself within this, and I will continue to write about characters that, for me, fiction is all about relationships. And I think for me, there are two kinds of novels. One in which there are a series of events, cascade of events, they happen, from one point to another. And I would say that maybe means Story of a Widow belongs to that category, and Rabbit Trap is very much into that category, the series of events that they unfold. But the other kind of novel in which there are moral implications and there are actions that we undertake or we commit, which have a consequence. And when we write about that consequence and how relationships are built, strengthened, and compromised and destroyed as a result of those actions, that cannot just happen immediately. You need a lot more time, observation, thinking about it, reflection back and forth, with the struggle with the material. And Between Clay and Desk was a novel like that. And I'm increasingly drawn to that kind of writing which satisfies me as a writer at a personal level. And then I also like to write for fun. So this next novel that I'm writing is about the Dajjal, or the Antichrist. And the legend of the Dajjal is that before the Dajjal comes into the world, it will send out a goat, and the goat will be the Dajjal's spy, and the goat will go out and say, क्या हो गया यहाँ पे, अच्छा वो पहाड़ टूट गया, नमूदार हो गई, वो चीज जल गई, and then we'll go and report back to the Dajjal that all that has taken place, and now we can issue forth and declare yourself.
So that's wonderful. So there's going to be withdrawal from Afghanistan, and now next.
No, the Dajjal is coming to Karachi. The Dajjal is coming to Karachi. That's what I said.
So is it going to be a political novel? Is it going to be a political novel?
It's going to be a political novel. It will be an edgy book.
Well, I'd like to give an opportunity to the audience members to ask questions. How does this work? Volunteer, please. Can we take mics to background audience members? Can't see the audience.
They can turn the mic and you have a question there.
There's a question. How about if the fourth row up in the middle? I think there's two questions there. All right. Got two questions. Is there another mic that's working?
You can turn it on.
No.
Oh. Yeah. Can't hear you. You have to turn the mic on. That's it.
Yes. Mr. Musharraf, I have two short questions for you. First of all, when you talk about globalization,
Alright, that's not working.
We can't understand you.
Can you hold the mic away or something?
Sir, first of of all, when you're talking about the globalization of Pakistani literature, can you hear me now? Okay. So you basically, are we just talking about England and America or perhaps Canada, or are we actually talking about the entire world? We're talking about Latin America and Africa when you talk about globalization of Pakistani literature. First question. Secondly, when you mentioned those edgy topics, can you please shed some light on what really are those edgy topics?
In terms of globalization, I think you're just talking about markets, right?
Yeah.
And you're just talking about more markets.
Yeah. But the second question, I think that was probably for you, Musharraf, because you keep mentioning edgy. You keep mentioning edgy. So I think they want to know what exactly you mean by that.
You know, this gentleman came to the Karachi Literature Festival. I think it's Steve Inskeep. He works for NPR.
Okay.
And he recently published on the NPR blog, the whole article is about edginess. So, you know, this was my retort to him. I hope he gets the message. Shuts up.
Okay, do we have another question over there? Can you just tell us who the question is for?
Who is it for? It's the general question for all the speakers. I'm an Morrison, and my question is that
I can't understand. Can you just speak up?
this hype which is given to Pakistan literature in English, can it be due to the fact that we are front page news and we are daily news in international media? Will it go away?
You know, as I said, people read for their own reasons. Writers write for their own reasons, and readers read for their own reasons. I don't think people pick up novels about, even if they buy a novel or they borrow a novel on Pakistan, which is about Pakistan because Pakistan is in the front, is in the headline. They will not read a novel unless, they won't at least finish a novel unless they find it interesting. Unless there's something in it which appeals to them. I can say for the three of us, I think all of us have written about things which interest us, which have nothing to do with the headlines in the West. I write about, what interests me hugely, that small, sometimes very large gap between what people say and what people do in life. And I find myself completely engaged in social observation. That's what I want to write about. I think I've written about the war on terror, really. I think I've written about human relationships. And if people find it interesting, they will pick it up. If they don't find it interesting, they won't.
Moni, I mean, there's we can make sort of an audience pie, right? And there's like, in my case, there's sort of that small audience that's interested in, short stories generally. And then, but there are also other components of the pie which are derived from Pakistan. There are people who are interested in Pakistani affairs. There are expatriate Pakistanis. There are Pakistanis, Indian expatriate Indians. So I think that if my short story in Wisconsin, say, I would have a much smaller audience.
Wasn't Obama reading your book? Wasn't it his bedside reading a book?
I hope so.
What do you think? Why do you think he picked it up? Why do you think he picked it up?
I know I picked it up because what's his name? Richard, the guy who's the Afghan guy. Goldbrook gave it to him.
Okay. Surprising what's up for people.
But that is for everybody. For every writer. If you are an African writer, then you will have people from Africa reading your book. You will have, if you write about Nigeria, if you're Chinua Achebe, people will be reading because they're Nigerians living in England, they're Nigerians living in America. So that happens with everybody.
Exactly.
We have a question.
Yes. I have a question specifically to Ms. Mohsin. Earlier in this talk, you had a comment about Mr. Musharraf's novel that it is not exactly political. And I hope you all understand what that statement means. But Edward Said also said that the air we breathe in is political. What I specifically want to ask is whether you feel comfortable as writers making statements about whether or not a piece of work is political.
What you were referring to when I said that, everything is political at the end of the day, global warming is a political issue. What I was referring to in this particular context is whether we want to write about the war on terror because it is being fought in Afghanistan and in Pakistan at the moment. Because the West is interested in reading about that, whether we panded to that particular audience by writing about it. That is what I want. So when I said that Musharraf's book is not political, I mean it is not about that per se.
And representation is political, right? I mean, by describing Pakistan with all its words as it is, that's a political act.
And
yeah, everything is political. Exactly. But if you were in a perfect society, then the politics would be very different than a society.
And isn't there a temptation for the journalists to come up to you and ask you to write pieces about, for instance, drones or water or any political issue?
It's crazy to think that we're experts.
Would you be able to write about the companies you did? It's a, it is a...
That was an observer.
Oh, you have a farm?
That is also true.
Yeah.
But then, do you think it's fair, do you find yourself turning things down, for instance, if somebody asks you to write? I like, for instance, what sort of political things have people approached you to?
I've been asked to write a profile of Hilarabani Khan.
I wonder why they asked you to write that.
I was asked to write about drones because I don't know enough about them. I'm not the right person.
No, I don't think we're quite touched by any of that quite in the same way. Can we take another question? Hello? Oh, sorry. Can we get a mic down here?
Okay. This is a question for Musharraf about this concept that we have that Pakistani fiction writers in English generally have the Western audience in mind. Let me ask you this question, that as a writer, would it be important for you to first consider as to what is the likely content of this book, or would other factors determine what you write about? Would it be your creativity and passion that you feel about the subject, or would it be the marketing angle? Now, let me also say that there is an important distinction between fiction writing and non-fiction. You could probably make this point about non-fiction writing, that it would be directed at a particular audience in mind. And one could quote, on the other hand, Western writers having such a tendency. Niven's book on Pakistan, a hard country, is controversial. And according to many critics, this was directed at dealing some segments of Pakistani society. And that is why their stories of ISI buying thousands of such books for distribution from their funds.
So as I mentioned that every writer makes the decision for himself or herself what engages them and what they really want to write about to that satisfaction of having written something as an artist. For example, you don't want to repeat yourself, you want to do something better than what you've done before, and so on and so forth. I do not think about the market before I choose a story. It's the strength of the story and the complexity of the story and the fact that story is going to be challenging for me to write down. Those are my considerations when I choose something to write. As Daniyal said, you have to be very careful about what you choose to write because, for example, Between Clay and Dust took me 10 years to write, and I had the draft in the first year, 10 years ago, but I was not sure that it was told exactly in the way that it had to be told. It's very simple, sir, and those of you who want to write and are budding writers, if you write about, stuff happening in Pakistan currently and you write competently as writers, it will get published, and it will get published to acclaim in the West. But that is not the way I would suggest you take as writers, because that is not, it is not a writer's job to play, it's the politician's job to play to the gallery, and to have a narrative to please his constituency. Your job is not to please. Your job is to have that satisfaction of having written something which is strong and which has some degree of purpose. Art is all about striking a posture that yes, you can create something permanent against impermanence which is around you. But if your work itself is impermanent, or of a reflection of that impermanence, then what the hell are you doing, writing fiction?
Hi, my name is Maha. My question is basically directed at Daniyal.
but since Moni Mohsin is here as well, it is about language and since my question is specifically about some words Daniyal Mueenuddin uses in his short stories that could have been better, like just using Desi words for them, Urdu words for them. I see Moni uses that in her work, and other writers like Aysha you just mentioned does that. So my question is why he doesn't put in Desi words when it would be more contextually relevant, because people from other languages do tend to do that.
Obviously, it's something that one thinks about because the real mojust, the correct word is the word in Urdu. But for me, it's sort of a blanket decision to say, okay, fine, I'm not going to do that, because then the question is, how far do you go? Clearly, in dialogue, the way that the words that I heard were to the extent that my dialogue is based upon things I've heard that was in Urdu or in Punjabi, and I just made a decision to translate it all.
I think that was great to actually be able to say that. It's not about.
I don't want to find that for some part of the audience it would be more resonant in Urdu, but for a large part of the audience it would be not resonant at all.
Yeah, but I mean, when you refer to K.K. Haruni in his study, his Islam again, you don't necessarily have to say his Islam again, it's basically about celebrated,
Yeah.
It's not necessary for explanation. So your usage of English, a practical decision on your part.
It's nice things that you give up are so delicious, How do you translate that? It's not possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a sort of executive decision.
Okay, my question is for Daniyal.
Sorry?